Okay, so President-elect Trump south of the border preparing to take office. Our guest says if he does slap on these threatened tariffs, it would add significantly to the cost of Canadian oil bought by America, and there could be a real hit for this country. Let's bring in Rory Johnston, founder of Commodity Context. Rory, always great to see you. We don't know, of course, what kind of tariffs Trump will end up slapping on, but if he did put tariffs on Canadian oil, which may be unlikely, but it would be damaging.
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Andrew. So exactly. I think the challenge here is that while we know for the classic take Trump, seriously, not literally, and even if it's a unlikely prospect that he applies these, I think it's a large enough tail risk that we need to consider, the scale of the impact on Canada. And a whole bunch of the particulars matter here. For instance, if it's just Canadian oil that's tariff versus kind of a broad universal tariff, as he kind of hinted at during the campaign. But just to kind of break those into two scenarios, I think largely if it's a universal tariff, U.S. refineries will feel the first brunt in terms of lower margins, and then that will get passed on largely to U.S. consumers through higher pump prices. The challenge, however, is that while most other kind of sources of U.S. crude imports have optionality, other places that they can sell their oil, they'd be to a degree insulated from this. Canada, unfortunately, because of the lock-in of our pipelines, has nowhere else to go. So that will eventually get pushed up to us. If it's a universal tariff, I think probably upwards of a third of that incidence of the tariff will fall on Canada, say, $6, $7, which based on current WCS differentials, would likely mean a 50% increase in the differential currently borne by WCS. But in the worst case scenario, if it's just Canada or Canada and Mexico that are subject to these 25% tariffs, I think the majority of that would unfortunately fall on Canadian exporters because the Gulf Coast is the marginal source of demand for Canadian barrels. And that could, that demand could be substituted by theoretically 25% cheaper imports from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, or even Venezuela. So the irony here will be a reduction in imports of Canadian oil and an increase in imports of OPEC oil. But I think it is a vulnerability that Canada is unique to.
And I think, Rory, you do argue that it's unlikely that these tariffs would go on Canadian oil.
Yeah, exactly. I think if we were rewinding till a month ago when it was the prospect of a universal tariff, I would have put the probability at maybe 5% that not only those tariffs would happen, but they would apply to Canada, an ally and USMCA partner, and that our oil would get hit. But now that it's been explicitly threatened, and Reuters had a story basically saying that, those with information close to the president have said that oil is not to be excluded. Well, it's still not my base case. I think that's probability's probably risen from maybe 5% to 20%. And I think that is, getting large enough to really start concerning people.
Turn to the global oil market. OPEC Plus has just delayed their meeting for a few days. You think that maybe if they do go ahead with a production increase in the new year, they should contemplate a modest one to get started?
That's exactly right. So the current OPEC meeting was scheduled for December 1st. That has been now delayed to December 5th. Part of that, when you see a delay like this, it likely means that there are some debates going on internally that they need more time to iron out. The challenge, however, is that the 5th is right around the last day of the month that Saudi Arabia in particular can decide what it's going to be shipping next month in January before those official selling prices are settled. So I do think that there is debate, but I still think my base case is that they delay this production increase. And like you were noting, I think the better case scenario here, I think the best thing that OPEC could do for its own credibility, because I think OPEC's credibility has suffered with this kind of unrealistic plan that's continuously and perpetually delayed. I think that they eventually need to settle. If they really want to get their barrels back into market, they need to settle on a smaller plan, say 1 million barrels a day of capacity of production increase over 2025 instead of the current plan for 2.2 million barrels a day. But then they have to stick to it. That would put downward pressure on prices, but I think it would return credibility to OPEC and it would stabilize the market for their own capacity and supplies.
There's a lot of pessimism over oil right now, and the warnings from the International Energy Agency, for example, of a glut next year. Is there any chance that prices could surprise to the upside, Rory? Could we see a significant rally in oil next year?
I think the prospect of a significant rally would need a bunch of other things to happen. For instance, let's say very serious and immediate sanctions or additional sanctions clamp down on Iranian exports by the Trump administration. But I do think that while I'm not exactly optimistic on prices next year, I do think that relative to consensus, I don't see quite the level of oversupply that, for instance, the IEA sees. I think that OECD demand in particular is likely to come in stronger than the IEA expects. And I think most importantly, in terms of looking at kind of consensus in this market still believes that OPEC will return some barrels next year. That said, I just don't see how they're going to do it with this current setup. And again, with this perpetually unrealistic target that they have to keep kicking down the line. The one point that is being debated, and I think is likely one of the key pieces that's delaying this meeting from the 1st to the 5th, is that on top of this cut return, this 2.2 million barrels a day, the UAE is also supposed to get a baseline increase of 300,000 barrels a day that was supposed to kick in January. That hasn't been delayed in these previous delays, and reports at least are that is now being discussed. So they're going to be very sticky and very reticent to delay that increase that they really fought hard for. And I think that's actually the biggest point of debate that's likely going to be happening within the organization in the next couple of days.
Rory Johnston, thank you very much. Rory is